All right. Okay. First thing you pass back, hey guys, what the heck happened on this last quiz? Y'all didn't do so hot.
It was very difficult.
Did y'all study for it?
Yes. I never saw
Professor, you know like how you hold it on your hand? I need like months to
No. Yeah, you got it. Lena?
Did anybody get a 4?
What?
Did anybody get a 4?
Yeah, someone got a 4. Nolan?
Oh man.
Amber? Allison?
Oh how good.
Come here.
Oh how good.
Christian?
I got 3.
That's mine?
I don't even know how I got 3. I think this is where it's like.
3?
2, that's it.
Maria?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
That's behind me.
okay, I got it right.
Do it? Bianca?
Probably higher than this one was the
Miguel? What? Got a 4? Heyo.
No,
Antonio?
No, we need to switch paper.
What? Got a 4?
We need to switch
Andrew? What? Got it? Oh, never mind.
They're both really good.
Intron? Got a 3. Good job. Danielle? Corey? Renee? Samantha? Samantha? Oh, I'm sorry, Samantha? Where? Oh, there we go. Helena? Helena? Not here? What? Come on.
That's Friday night.
Aliana?
I saw
Aliana?
I got that times 2.
Got it. 3. Abigail? Got it. 3. Hamza? Is he mine? Layla? Amy?
I got you.
3. Peter? Alexandra? Farah? Farah?
I think it's from, you know, being best friend on our team.
How is that easier?
Okay, guys, remember, guys, you gotta study for those things. We're gonna be having, our next one is gonna be after the next lecture, after this one. And that's your last kind of quiz for credit or what have you, because all the rest are the extra credit. You got 2 more after that where I'm just giving you the points. Most of you guys, your grades are good enough where you may not need that extra boost. And guys, one of the reasons why I give you that nice little boost is because your next big grade is the final, and that's a big one. Alexandra? Oh, okay, things going on. We got the talent show tonight, if you're interested in seeing that. Distracted driver tomorrow, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. Next thing you can't do is the World Cup watching party. That's gonna be the first day of your vacation. You can go up to the F-130 and watch the game. Can't do that. Got mechanical bull riding from 11 to 1 on Monday the 28th in the atrium. Pancakes and PJs, not sure if y'all can do that time-wise, but there it is, can do, and of course the virtual 5K. I really think y'all ought to think about doing this over your Thanksgiving break. Participate in a college writing contest. You could win a cash prize, but also more importantly, you get to be in part of this contest. And if you do decide to do it, you need to have your essay emailed to Lisa Kirby by Friday, December 9th at 5. And finally, the fine art events. They're having the Jazz Tech and lap band concert on Saturday, the 12th. So if you're interested in doing that, then go ahead and go to that little code that I sent y'all and sign up for it. Any other questions?
Close all tabs.
Okay, is this the slide we got up to? About the Trail of Tears? By the way, some of the Cherokee actually stayed. They basically fled up to the foothills and they stayed in North Carolina, and right now you do have the eastern band of Cherokee that are on a reservation in North Carolina that basically a pastor left them all this land, and these were the guys that didn't own slaves, and they think they're better than the Western Cherokee. The Western Cherokee are the ones that were forced out to Oklahoma. Many of them were slave owners. And again, we don't know how many slaves died on the Trail of Tears. Out of the two groups, I'm Eastern Cherokee, but I don't really see, the Western Cherokee in Oklahoma are really good people that are really trying to do a lot for the tribe. But this is a case where basically Andy Jackson pushed back. And remember, it's on the Trail of Tears, it's not just the Cherokee, but if you can see all those tribes over there that are moving out, the Chickasaw, the Sauk. This one is wrong. This one's wrong. Maybe some of them went, but guys, when they actually went to fight against the Seminole, you had the Seminole War break out. And the Seminole, basically, they lived in the Everglades, and they resisted relocation underneath Chief Osceola. From 1830 to 1842, the U.S. Army is trying to kick them out. They lose more than 1,500 men, and finally the U.S. withdraws, saying, no, it's just swampland anyway. But because a lot of the people that went and lived with the Osceola were runaway slaves from the United States back when this belonged to Spain and everything, and even afterwards, and the Seminoles let them in, and later on during the 1880s, they would become, basically, they would become Indian fighters. They were kind of like the Green Berets. They were known as the Buffalo Soldiers. All right, next. Jackson in the West. Basically, political calculation guided Jackson on the issue of federal support for internal improvements. Like he vetoed the Maysville Road. And the Maysville Road was something that Clay had specifically designed that was only going to be good for Tennessee and nobody else. And I mean, it was pretty apparent how opulent it was in its spending. And Jackson vetoed it, which Clay didn't think would happen. He thought that Jackson would have passed it, and then they could have said, oh, look at what Jackson did. So the people kind of loved him for that, and also he backed very low prices for public land. That again is something else that the people of the West really enjoyed. You want to sit up on the desk instead of the floor? She's sleeping. You want to sit on the desk instead of the floor?
Oh, no, it's okay.
Okay. Are you paying attention to class, or are you watching something down there?
No.
Because I don't see you typing or anything like that. Oh, and by the way, I'd make sure that you have your pants up a little bit next period, because I saw your belly button when you were coming in. And could one outfox the fox by putting a jewel or a gemstone or something in their belly button? I don't know. Anyway, you need to tend to that. Huh?
Why were you looking?
Well, just as students are passing by, and I did see another lady that was showing quite a lot of flesh, and as we're told as teachers that we do have to enforce a dress code, that's probably why I was looking. And likewise, if I do something like not shave my head, I would, y'all might, or if I got a cut on my head because I was shaving it, I expect y'all to say, what are you doing? I wouldn't say, what are you doing looking? Because we're the enforcers, we have to look at stuff like that.
I mean, it's your head, it's like, that sounds a little sick. I don't know.
Or if you saw my belly button, if I was wearing a midriff.
I'd be scared.
All right, South Carolina, the nullification crisis. Now, the South, everywhere in the South, was really big in their opposition to tariffs and the tariff of abominations, because basically they saw themselves as the victim because they were having to pay more for everything, they were getting less in return from the sales of their crops. So John C. Calhoun, who was Andrew Jackson's vice president, presented a speech at the South Carolina Exposition and Protest, where he said it was the right of a state to nullify federal acts, especially those that only benefited one section. Now, according to him, if the states found a federal law abhorrent, they could have a meeting, basically a concurrent majority could meet to recall and rewrite federal laws. Because the way they said it, the federal government was made out of many states. So the many states could tell the federal government what to do. Now, do you think Andy Jackson liked this?
No.
Ray Governor? Andy Jackson does not at all like this. Indeed, he sends warships down off the coast of South Carolina. He reinforced the federal force there. He asked Congress to enact a force bill, forcing them to comply with the tariffs. So guys, this could have been the Civil War before the Civil War. You ready? So what happened is Congress thankfully runs in and is like, hey guys, don't fight, we're going to lower the tariffs. So South Carolina will be happy, but you have to rescind nullification. You have to say you can't do that process anymore. And basically South Carolina, like a little brother or sister, they rescind they rescind it, but like right before they say they can't do it, they nullify the force bill. And what Andy Jackson does, he doesn't respond to it. He's like, fine, whatever. Now guys, was that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, what would have been a good thing about it? Nobody knows? What might have been a good thing about Andy Jackson just letting sleeping dogs lie? Yeah, you don't get in a fight, everybody's happy, just go home. But what's bad about him not doing anything? What might be a consequence? Where a state says that basically they've got power over the federal government. States' rights. And like I said, pretty soon that's going to grow and evolve, and we got the whole thing known as the Civil War. Ready for the next slide? Now, Jackson and the bank. Now, many Americans dislike the second bank of the United States. You know, they believe it benefited the wealthy only. State bankers found that it was too restrictive. If you're a speculator or a debtor, you prefer instability instead of stability. You know, that's like having a mutual fund where you're going to get a 6% return every year, regardless. Now, what's the problem of getting a 6% return? Well, guys, right now with inflation the way it is, you're losing money by keeping that in there because inflation is higher than 6%. Okay? Not only that, if you were allowed, you know, you buy stocks, you buy it, the value goes high, you sell before the price bottoms out. Same thing if you're a debtor. If you're a debtor, you probably like inflation because that means the dollar is weaker and weaker. So you actually have more of them that you can pay off your debts with. Now, Congress, led by Clay and Webster, who hated Andy Jackson, they were trying to do anything to basically take away his popularity. They approved the recharter of the bank in 1832 rather than wait until 1836. Because 1832 was an election year. This will get them, yeah. Well, if you're Andy Jackson, do you like being put in a corner? No. So basically, he fights back. He vetoes the recharter bill. And not only that, but all federal funds are withdrawn from the national bank. And he hires hired his Secretary of the Treasury. He said, take all the money out of the national bank. The Secretary said, that's insane. That's going to wreck the economy. He says, all right, you're fired. Hires another guy. Take all the money out of the national bank. That's crazy. Okay, you're fired. The last guy he hired was Secretary Taney. Take all the money out of the national bank. Okay, boss. And instead they moved the money to a bunch of pet banks, which were like private state banks. Now, the president of the bank, he's fighting for his life. He's trying to keep his job. His name was Nicholas Biddle. So basically, he calls in all the loans that the banks had made. He raises up interest rates. Here's a popular cartoon, a political cartoon of Andy Jackson. That's supposed to be Nicholas Biddle. And basically what happens? What happens is incredible economic instability. Which, that would have been popular with the people. Ready for the next slide? Ready for the next slide? You can't handle the next slide, man. Now rolling. Oops, where did it come up? There we go. Okay, guys, what I basically just gave you is I gave you kind of the political, economic, financial background for everything that's going to be building on it now. Okay? And the period known as the Great Transformation. Period from 1828 to 1840. Basically where we expand upon the stuff we got started earlier on. The Transportation Revolution. Okay, extending the nation's roads. Both government and private enterprise embarked on road building projects following the War of 1812 to help establish the integrated national market economy, you know, where the North is doing what? What's the North doing? Because we want to have that regional economic specialization. What's the North doing? Y'all remember? Huh? Yeah, textile mills and factories, industrialization. Okay, what was the South doing? Yeah, cash crops like cotton. Okay, and cotton that was not only feeding the industry of the North, it was feeding the industry of Europe. And what was the West doing? Huh? Yeah, they grew the grain. And in order for this all to succeed, you needed not only a strong dollar and economy, but you needed a strong transportation network that connected all three areas together. And basically political leaders had to find a way to overcome and somehow connect the vast distances and difficult terrain that made up America. The nation needed a transportation system that would take the resources of the West and South into the North and then funnel northern manufactured goods back out. By 1838, the national road had reached Ohio. By 1841, it had reached Illinois. And as it's being built out, it's continuing to expand and utilize state-of-the-art technology and paving and like building stone bridges. And the series of private roads that feed into the national road slowly emerges into a national transportation network. And it may have been great for travelers, but it did very little to bring down the cost of shipping. Cost of shipping by road would still have been about 15 cents. And not incredibly fast. Ready for the next slide? Well, where do you go if you want to go cheap? Guys, you go to the canals. The new roads link rural America to an expanding network of waterways and make building freight or hauling freight over long distances as inexpensive as possible. Indeed, in 1826, the Erie Canal was completed. Now remember, the Erie Canal, which connected the Hudson River to Lake Erie, cost more than $5 million back then. Everybody had laughed at them, saying, oh, you're just throwing that money away. But with the completion of the Erie Canal, basically goods from Buffalo to Albany fell from $100 to do it down to just $15. And the time it took fell from 20 days to just 8. Indeed, New York Governor Clinton announced that the canal had already generated $750,000 in profits. And basically this flood of goods turned New York City into a major shipping location, where they eclipsed Boston as a larger city. Ready for the next slide? Well, Pennsylvania sees what happened to New York, and they start thinking, hey, we want to take advantage of what we have. So Pennsylvania began work on a massive canal, road, and waterway system that would make them the commercial center of the Western Hemisphere. They advertised themselves as a golden link to the West. Central to their plan was the mainline canal that would connect the Delaware River to the Ohio River in Pittsburgh. The only problem was there was a difference of 2,000 feet in elevation that had to be overcome. Basically, they would have needed locks as 5 times as big as the locks on the Erie Canal. So what did they do about it? Well, necessity is the mother of invention. They created what they called the Allegheny Portage Railroad. Here you can see a modern piece of it right now. Basically, they would take the cars, would feed into a canal, there'd be a railroad car underneath it, they'd tether the car to it, then basically they'd, using mules, they'd drag the boat out of the canal, take it up to the next little portage, and on the other side of this was another canal that the boat would go into. Now, if you were going all the way across the state, I think you had to do 5 such trips going up, only 4 coming back down. Charles Dickens even took a ride on it, the British author. He called it an exhilarating ride. And because they were able to overcome that, I mean, these guys were getting cocky. They felt that with only 75 miles of canal, they could make it all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. And that whole Allegheny Portage Railroad was just a small facet of the money they spent. I mean, they spent tunnels, aqueducts, enormous locks, all at tremendous cost. Now, why would they have spent so much money on it?
You saw what it did to New York?
Huh?
You saw what it did to New York?
Not only did they see what it did to New York, but you gotta spend money to make money. And they thought, hey, everybody's gonna be loving this, everybody's gonna be doing great. Kind of like, guys, I don't know how long HEB is going to do great in their expansion here. When I was down in Laredo, I lived down there for a little while, right when Albertsons moved in to try to take over from HEB. And Albertsons was totally convinced that people would be willing to spend a little bit more on food, you know, if the store was a little bit nicer and they had nicer things there. Guys, it totally fell flat on its face. And HEB is the only store down in South Texas. Ready for the next slide? And by the way, guys, even though I don't want to, well, I'll tell it to you later. Now, guys, Pennsylvania was just a small part of this whole canal explosion. You had states and individuals in the north and in the west that banded together to make all these canals. They granted out monopolies. Now wait a minute, why would you grant a monopoly to a canal company? Did y'all know that there is a monopoly here in Plano, as well as in Dallas? Any place that has a cable network, that cable network has a monopoly. Wait a minute, why would a cable network have a monopoly? Why would a canal company have a monopoly? Where they said, we're not going to let in any competition. Because guys, canals, just like cable, when it first came here to Dallas, they had to lay all those lines. They had to dig up the ground, plant, they had to buy all the wire, they had to connect it to all the, even the houses that didn't want cable, they had to connect. Guys, they spent tons of money. And to protect them for their investment, basically they were granted a monopoly. And you have this race that began over who could get the best access. And like I said, most of this is going on in the north and in the west. It's not really going on in the south. Why? Because the south, we already had a lot of rivers. We kind of already had a riverine, for lack of a better word, economy. For example, the Ohio Canal was to connect Cincinnati on Lake Erie to Portsmouth on the Ohio. Let's see, where is it? There's the Ohio Canal. Basically, it was to connect Lake Erie to Portsmouth on the Mississippi. It was completed in 1833, making it possible for a merchant in New York City to go up the Hudson River to Albany, then take the Erie Canal to Buffalo, then take Lake Erie to Cleveland, take the Ohio Canal to Portsmouth, and then go on down the Ohio and Mississippi rivers to New Orleans. So basically, bada bing, bada boom, you could now go all the way around the interior of our nation with canals. Now guys, like I told you though, this is not cheap. I mean, canals cost as much as $20,000 to $30,000 a mile to build. And that's back then money. And even though careful investors could make from 15 to 20% interest on their money, by the 1840s, many canal companies were facing bankruptcy. Indeed, Pennsylvania and their mainline canal, aqueduct, everything system, they got into a debt of $34 million by 1842 and basically had to suspend payments for 3 years and pass harsh taxes. And almost every state that got into the canal boom was caught up in the same trap. One of the reasons why the mainline canal stuff didn't work is, I mean, the passengers, they'd make great time out west, but it would cost you as much as money it would take to buy 6 acres of prime farmland to get out there. And guys, if you're going out west to start a farm, the more land you have, the more money. So, not a lot of people took it. Nowhere near what they thought they would. Ready for the next slide? Steam power. Well, steam power was revolutionary in that it made upstream travel economical. In 1807, Robert Fulton, there's a picture of him, demonstrated that ships could be powered by steam. Henry Shreve, in 1816, he designed basically what would become kind of the paddle boats, you know, with a big, long, flat bottom, kind of perfect for going up the Mississippi. It's got the paddle wheel over here and a paddle wheel on the other side that could go up and down the Mississippi River. And as more and more steam vessels and advances in technology, the price of everything goes down. Indeed, by 1840, the price for shipping a ton of goods downstream fell from 1.25 cents a mile to less than half a cent. To go upstream, the price fell from 10 cents a mile to guess how much? How much did it cost you to go down? How much did it cost you to go downstream? Half cent. So how much would it cost you to go upstream? Half cent. Guys, from 10 cents to half a cent, oh my gosh, now you could get stuff going up. Needless to say, its effect on agriculture exploded all along the tributaries. People were rushing out for opportunity. Now, what else might be going on with steam power? Well, as a lot of inland cities were jealous because, they didn't have the access to all these rivers and everything, so you started to have the development of the steam-powered railroad, which first took place in the late 1820s. Robert Stephenson in England was the first guy to create a steam locomotive. And what's funny, he built, the name of it was the Rocket. And all of the investors were outside, they had finished the model, and they were getting ready to get it going. And guess what? They forgot to bring the matches. And you have to get a fire so you can start boiling the water, so you can start having steam production. Everybody was freaking out. What were they going to do about starting a fire? Well, one guy says, aha! And he reached into his pocket, and guess what he pulled out? Some of you in this class might know. Some of you might not. What might he have pulled out of a pocket? Could have been a shirt pocket? Huh? A what? Something to, well, you could light a cigar with one of these, potentially, even though it would take some time. Let's see, 1, 2. So far, 2 people in this class could have started the fire on the Rocket. No, 3. Excuse me. 1 and 4. What? Glasses. Basically using the focus of the sun and beaming it through the lens of the glasses, create that fine spot. Fire starts. Anyway, it starts up over there. This is insane crazy. In 1828, the Baltimore and Ohio was formed, the B&O. If you've ever played Monopoly, you might be familiar with that one. And guys, it was a risk. I mean, at first, basically, they had laid the rails down, then they'd have horses drag the carts. Well, then along comes Peter Cooper, who built the first American steam locomotive, the Tom Thumb. And they light up its engines, it starts rushing down the track at about 13 miles an hour, and he brags that his engine could beat a horse-drawn carriages with just the same amount of goods. Oh, you are so on. So, they have the race, and guess who wins? The Tom Thumb or the horse? The horse, of course. The horse wins. So, B&O abandoned steam power, because guys, it was expensive, brand new technology. Meanwhile, in other places like South Carolina, they got the federal money to build a 136-long mail route. And build a railroad line to take the mail from Charlotte to Hamburg. And because it's going to be for federal use, you're going to get federal money. So they start these railroads, and then if you're driving a steam-powered locomotive, you gotta stop every once in a while to get on more water, get more sand that can act as like traction for the steel wheels. And when they'd stop at these stations, and also to drop off mail, people would say, hey, can you take me up 2 stops from here? I'll pay you. And they're like, okay. And basically they started taking on passengers. And pretty soon they were making more money from the passengers than they were from the mail. And everything seemed to be going along great until you'd have the people like right in front, right behind the engine, because they like to see things that's going on. But guys, basically steam power, it's under a lot of pressure. And basically they had steel boilers in there. Now, one thing about steel, does steel like to bend? No, steel likes to stay where it is. Anybody here ever broken a wire coat hanger? Starts, the more and more you bend it, the hotter and hotter it gets. Snap. Basically, as you got this iron thing under pressure, it's expanding, and then as you release the steam pressure, it contracts. Well, if you keep doing this, you're going to weaken the metal, and if you're not careful and don't replace it, the boiler's going to explode. So the boiler exploded. It killed and injured some of the passengers, but more importantly, it damaged some of the mail, which is a big no-no. So what they did is they put in what's known as a buffer car. And basically, it was a car that was filled with cotton bales. So you had all this cotton that was, the squares, woo, 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 to absorb the explosion. Then you had the people, yay people. Then at the very end you had the mail. So if it exploded, the cotton would absorb most of that damage. Whatever went on, if it hurt some of the people, hey, it was their own fault for taking your rail line, but the mail would be safe. But even then, railroads in America don't really remain big until the 1850s. Why? Well, guys, it was a radical new and expensive technology, and because everybody was fighting against each other, you didn't have any rail standards, and if I'm in competition with you, I'm not going to use the same gauge, which is the distance between the rails, as you, because you'll just switch over and you'll start using my tracks in certain areas. So you have all this fighting against each other that really slows down the growth of the railroads. Ready for the next slide? Then we have the information revolution. Now, the revolution in transportation produced a revolution in the transmission of information. People had feared that America was too big to make it work. In 1799, it took a week to travel from Virginia to New York City, 3 weeks for a letter from Cincinnati to get to the Atlantic coast. Indeed, it took such a long time that people like Thomas Jefferson visioned our nation growing as a number of small republics within the whole. But with the opening of the Erie Canal, all of a sudden, all this changes. Letters from Buffalo reached New York City in 6 days and might be able to get out to New Orleans in as little as 2 weeks. So now that you have it so much easier to get information, people want to find out what information is. For business opportunities, for life opportunities. So in like 1790, we have 92 newspapers with a circulation of 4 million. By 1835, we've got 1,258 magazines with a circulation of 90 million. And guys, because of our ways of travel, the earth has been made so small. Do we have a lot of magazines? Do we have a lot of magazines and newspapers? No. Wait a minute, why not? Guys, what do we rely to get our news on now? Yeah, guys, we can see news as it's happening on the internet. And guys, the number of cable news stations, not just talking about the other, guys, there's tons of news stations. Pretty much all saying the same thing. All right, y'all ready to pack up?